And it's her hand that will finish the features on the face, and her mood and mind and sense of humor that will determine the transformation and transcendence from a snapshot into something quite different from a snapshot, quite radically different, larger, but not just a matter of size, but larger in scope. That's another thing too about Patricia's paintings, is that there's almost always an animal of some kind.
I work rather tight and hard-edged, and this loosens me up. It forces me to loosen up the image. So that's really why I do it. If I'm short of a color, I sometimes will paint it, as I did on this one. I painted a color I needed and put that on. But I'll buy the paint at the art supply store, the color paper at the art supply store and rip it up. But there certainly does give it texture, which my painting does not have. In the old days, I had a lot of texture because I used a palette knife. But that was a long time ago. I paint strictly with acrylics. I really have a good time doing that, which is kind of strange for some people. I think it's crazy, but I love making those fish, designing those fish. And then I decided to make a drawing of the rocking chair. And after I made the drawing of the rocking chair, I decided to make the collage. And then when I was looking at the empty rocker, I realized all those people are no longer here. And I said, there's an empty rocker, but there's new life. And the windows, it allows you to come in and go out. And the chance of a new life with a sailboat and birds, and took on a life of its own. But I also like to paint around the edges because it's kind of like a Baroque thing to do, and it means that it goes on beyond the canvas. Always very aware of movement in space, and that's what I concentrate on with my colors, to make sure it's moving. In the 80s and early 90s, they were in Providence. Almost every night of the week you could go into somebody's house. They had an open studio, and these were all done in a studio. So I had a studio series. I spent quite a little time in Italy, and I was just taken up with Italian culture and design and the largeness of life that was being lived over there. This is the vigil. Actually, this was my daughter. And again, I made a wine scene, which I often put into my paintings.
Portraits of a reenactment of the revolution. And yet at the same time, the irony of it is that Patricia and I were a patriotic generation in the years of our childhood, the 1930s and 40s. And we're all looking for what America meant, what democracy meant, and what defending our society meant. So the whole world was just beyond my roof and my room. So it was a magical landscape, and Patricia perceived that. I think I have some of that indigenous spirit. And then I also did a spirit wall of masks. I painted him in this color because he liked this. He called us old rose. And he was really a Victorian man, and a man of few words. And then this one is the prize-winning one at the recent show at the art club. I guess I typed it looking back. It's thinking about what one loses when they look back and what they have to look forward to, the unknown. I decided to combine that space with my living space so that it's kind of a seamless process now of living and creating my art in the same venue. My friendship with Patricia and my visits to her studio and my visits to her place here in the Wayland Manor, and that is that the longer I look at one of her images, one of her paintings, the more fascinated I am, both by the process by which she creates the image, but also by the multiple insights that I can have into myself, but mostly into her world. I really take her work very seriously. I buy some of her things
Some of her things are gifts to me. I want to be her, I said before, the Tonto to her Lone Ranger. You know, the Sancho Panza to her Don Quixote. You know, I like playing that role when I go to visit her studio or when I go to her homes.
He's grown now, but this is when he was prepubescent. And he had a little friend he invited over to the house, and I was going to take them swimming down in Matunuck because they like to jump off the docks. And I was quite taken with the innocence of them and the way they were standing and of that age group. And this car was one of the cars he learned to drive on. And the kind of like rising stars here, I haven't finished it at all. There's a lot more work to be done. But I put in this little puppy here too because it reminds me of the innocence of these young people. Egg tempers out of Italy, and this is done with rabbit skin glue on poplar, and you have to cook the rabbit skin glue, and then you make the temper with an egg and water, or some time-consuming process. And I also incorporated some gold leaf work in here too, which I was surrounded by people with a lot of gold jewelry. My brother-in-law and a friend of mine who was also an artist, and this is me in my studio. Choice of taking a photograph and copying it, or making a drawing and copying it, and then putting it onto the wood block by a transference paper. Like you just trace it on here. And on this block, I find I'm doing a lot of drawing directly onto the block. And then you use an instrument like this. It's kind of neat. It's the only instrument that I'm using. And I carve into the wood. And then I take a piece of paper and put it on. And I color each area as I want it, and I put the paper down, then I take a spoon and go over it and pick it up and look at it. If I don't like it, I put it back again and I do some more, or I'll go on to another area. So this is kind of the finished product. It's a neat process, and I enjoy the unexpected wood images. You know, sometimes the paint doesn't take the wood, and it makes an interesting color area. But I'm actually living and feeling my new space. I'm hoping that it will fulfill some of my expectations, but I'm always prepared for the unexpected. Oftentimes, as in my paintings, I'm prepared for the unexpected. But I'll just take it a day at a time and continue my journey and keep life fluid and open-ended.